Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, and this is Child Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. And it's a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And chat room is open. I did pop the link into there to what I'm looking at here tonight. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate everybody who's listening to the shows. You know, I must have like 35,000 shows listened to. That's a lot of shows. And I've done about, 780 shows or something, getting close to 800 shows. And I just appreciate everybody who's taking the time to listen to what I have to say, you know, over this last couple of years. Like November 2009 is when I started doing Blog Talk Radio here. And, you know, I appreciate everybody who spent the last 2 years with me, really. It's just awesome. And, you know, just this monologue of going on and on about child abuse. But I really appreciate it. It's part of my healing journey. I really feel like it's really a big part of my healing journey, and it's really helped me to get out what I needed to get out, say what I needed to say about child abuse. And it's also something that I feel a necessity to do, which is speak publicly about child abuse, because I think the child abuse is just not talked about enough. And so I figure, hey, Blog Talk Radio is a great medium for it. It's a great place for it, and there's a lot of other people on here that are talking about it too, and it's great. So I'm glad to be able to add my voice to those people who are out here speaking publicly about child abuse, right? And so thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it. I'm not a counselor or therapist, you know. I'm just a private citizen, paying to do my shows here on Blog Talk Radio. You have to listen at your own discretion because I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive subject, and abuse, you know, you have to be sure, like what you're listening to, you know, you have to be sure that it won't bother you. And if you think the topics of abuse might bother you, then you know you don't listen to my show, right? Turn it off, because I just tell it like it is, and I don't sugarcoat it or minimize it. That's my goal, is to, you know, present the reality of child abuse and just how serious it really is for these kids out here who are losing their lives, you know, being abused in every way, losing their lives due to the abuse that they're suffering, and the reality that so many of us survivors have had to go through. And so, you know, you have to listen to my shows at your own discretion. Young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows, because this is not for young children. My shows are not for young children. And, you know, anybody under the age of 18, I just ask that you have an adult listen to the show with you, and that way they can help you make a decision whether or not you should be listening. And, you know, that'd be great, because you deserve to be protected at all times. The children have the right to be protected, and so you need to know how to keep yourself safe online. And if you haven't got that information, just type into your browser online safety for children, internet safety for children, you know, and that will take you to some websites that will give you some good information on what to do, what not to do online, so you can keep yourself safe and protect yourself from child sexual predators and pedophiles and people who would like to get a hold of children and sexually use children and sexually abuse children. Make sure you keep yourself safe. So thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate it. I'm talking about child sexual abuse lately in the evenings, and you know, I don't always talk about CSA, incest, and like I just started talking about this specific topic a few months back, especially maybe in June, starting to talk about this really on a sort of a regular basis. And that's because this is what I'm dealing with, my own issues regarding child sexual abuse that I suffered as a child, and also because I had a comment from somebody that said, what's the big deal about CSA? You know, they said that to the wrong person, because I'm like, okay, now I'm talking about it, and I'm just going to keep on talking about it. And so that's what happened. And I feel it's important to talk about. It's so many people don't want to hear about child sexual abuse. It's so, and I understand why. I completely get why. It's heinous. It's horrific. It never should happen. No child should ever be abused ever in any way, you know. And I used to focus on all the different types of abuse, and I will continue to do that. I'm just doing a segment, a piece of my work on child sexual abuse, and really talking about what I'm saying, what I want to say about it. And you know, it's my show. I'm paying to do my show here, so that's why I'm doing it. But, you know, it's the issue is that it's not talked about enough. I want to encourage people to get involved, you know what I mean? Get involved where you can to help stop abuse of all types. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. We live in today's world where we should all know better. You know, everybody on this planet today should know better. We've been around long enough, you know, 2011, hello, that, you know, people should know that it's wrong to hurt anybody. And some people think, oh, well, child sexual abuse doesn't hurt a child. Well, I got news for you. It really does. And, you know, I'll be writing many books about it. And it's great. And I can't wait to get started. I've actually started one book, and I'll be starting another one right after that, another one right after that. And I'm just going to keep publishing material and keep talking about child sexual abuse and all the different types of abuse, right? And so I hope you will, too. Get involved, do whatever you can, make some noise, but stand up and have the guts and the courage to stand up for what is right. And that is to say that we need to stop child abuse, period. End of story. I mean, this is ridiculous that people think it's okay to do these things to children. Anything. I'm talking child physical abuse, verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, child neglect, child sexual abuse. This is all wrong. We all know it's wrong. And yet people kill their children every day, you know, and if they don't kill them, they just continue to abuse them in every way. This is ridiculous, you know. And so let's all do something. Get up and raise our voices and say no. You know, even, I mean, you know, the sad thing is that, I mean, I know not everybody's into advocating against stopping child abuse, but learn signs and symptoms, you know, and protect your own children. Make sure that they're not being abused. Make sure the children in your children's lives are not being abused, right? And just do that, and we could stop pretty well almost all child abuse, right? So if everybody was protecting their own children, they wouldn't be abusing them, right? So the whole idea is get the information, learn how to keep your children safe, and learn how to protect your own children so that they're not abused in any way. And that would save a lot of children from being abused, you know, and just, you know, be a voice where you can be for these children out here, right? This is so important. So tonight I want to look at this information from Medline Plus. That's www.nlm.nih.gov. And so it's the U.S. National Library of Medicine. So that's the U.S. National Library of Medicine, the NIH, National Institutes of Health. It's a great website. There's all kinds of good information on here. They have the A to Z, and you can just pick any topic, any number of topics, and really some great info here. And I think what I'm looking at is child sexual abuse. And child sexual abuse, you know, they just a little bit of an overview here of, you know, talking about child sexual abuse. And they said that child sexual abuse is a deliberate exposure of minor children to sexual activity. This means a child is forced or talked into, coerced into sex or sexual activities by another person. And such abuse includes things like oral sex, pornography, sexual intercourse, touching, fondling, right? And we all know the stats. 1 in 3 to 4 girls, 1 in 6 to 7 boys will be abused sexually under the age of 18. Those stats have changed. Recently we've seen some different stats out there saying 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 4 boys will be sexually abused under the age of 18 in some way, whether that's unwanted sexual touching, molestation, exploitation, rape, you name it. This is horrific. It needs to stop. It's happening within homes, right? And many people think, oh, it wouldn't happen in my home. This would never happen in my home. Take a guess. 90 to 95% of child sexual abuse is perpetrated by somebody the child knows. Where are your children 90% of the time? You know, if they're not at a daycare, babysitters, or school, they're at home. So about 40% of child sexual abuse is actually perpetrated by the parents. That's a stat that's out there. 38%. The other, about 30-odd% is perpetrated by somebody the child knows, who trusts, family member, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, cousin so-and-so, you know, a neighbor who is kind of considered to be family, somebody who's very close to the family and has access to your child. Where does child sexual abuse happen? It happens where the child is. Where's your child at? Is your child at home? Or is your child at school? Or is your child at the daycare? Because that's where the child sexual abuse is going on. And I hope everybody will wake up and smell the coffee. Most children are at home, especially at night. Where do you think a lot of this child sexual abuse is happening? At home, at night. And if it's not, it's at the daycare or it's at the babysitters during the day. This is horrific, but this is the truth, right? And that's why nobody wants to deal with this. Because it's like, oh, well, then we have to arrest Grandpa. You know, we'll have to send Grandpa off to jail because we'll have to prosecute. We'll have to, you know, report the crime because, hey, child sexual abuse is a crime. Thank God for those laws. Let me tell you that. And, you know, so then, okay, well, Aunt Jane will have to go to prison. I mean, who wants Aunt Jane to go to prison? Well, we'll just cover it up. It'll be our little dirty secret. And if it's Aunt Jane, it's mom or dad. If it's not mom or dad, it's brother or sister. If it's not, you know, brother or sister, it's cousin so-and-so, right? This is a sad truth and reality. Or it's uncle so-and-so. Or it's neighbor down the street that's considered to be a family member. This is the ridiculous situation that's going on for kids right now. They're being raped and sodomized, sexually used, molested, you know, fondled and touched, and unwanted sexual touching, and having to deal with some pervert and their perverted desires against this child. I mean, this is it. I've been talking for the last 2.5 months about being raped and sodomized by my 21-year-old brother when I was 8 years old. And the issue is like, that never should have happened, right? And you think you should be able to trust your family members. But, hey, I grew up in a home where you couldn't trust anybody. You know what I mean? My parents were trying to kill me. My brother was sexually using me. And there you go, right? So I'm just lucky I made it. I didn't used to think I was that lucky, right, until a few years ago I changed my mind. But the thing is, is, these kids out here, so many of them won't make it, right? This is the sad part. They said society was reluctant to deal with child sexual abuse a few decades ago. That's like, maybe 20 years ago. Today it's considered a serious issue. And, even today, you got people not wanting to deal with it, people not wanting to admit it, that it even happened, or even to acknowledge it. Like, who cares, right? Like that one comment to me, what's the big deal? What's the big hype about CSA? I mean, I'm sitting there going, buddy, I had just said I was sodomized and raped by my 21-year-old brother as an 8-year-old girl. And I thought, who could say something like that to me? Somebody who doesn't have a heart, or somebody who sexually uses children, right? And I thought, my God, I'm going to talk about this, and I don't care. You know what I mean? This is absolutely ridiculous. They said, it's difficult to determine how often child sexual abuse occurs because it's more secret than physical abuse, and children are often scared to tell anyone about the abuse, and many cases of abuse are not reported. So abusers are usually men, but that's just not the case. I mean, abusers, they said about, men and women both abuse, right? It's not just a male thing. It's not just a female thing. Anybody can sexually abuse a child, even adolescents and other children, right? So we all know this. It's not an age thing. It's not a gender thing. It has nothing to do with the economy, or how wealthy a person is, or how poor a person is, or how educated a person is, or how uneducated a person is. It's a personal choice. These people, these abusers, choose to abuse. Abuse is a choice. I hope everybody knows this. It's a choice that they make, and it's a bad choice on behalf of the child, right? And so they just kind of go on to talk a little bit about that. And they said that they tend to know the person they're abusing. And this is the issue. It's whoever's around your child. So I like to promote this stuff, and hope that parents are listening to this. I mean, it's my goal. I wish that parents were listening to this. You know what I mean? I know that a lot of survivors listen to my stuff, but I'm hoping that parents will listen to my stuff, because they need to know the reality that, hey, child sexual abuse occurs. Whether you want to believe it could happen in your own home or not is just absolutely regardless. Is beside the point. Child sexual abuse is occurring within the churches. It's happening at the schools. It's happening at the daycares, the after-school programs. So even if you're not abusing your child sexually, somebody else could be abusing your child sexually. And if you don't know the signs and symptoms, your child may be hiding a secret, because they may have been threatened, or they may be told it's a game. It's their little game, right? Their own little special game. I wasn't told that. I was just violently raped and sodomized. Like my brother was like threatening to sodomize me again every night if I told. So I was like, oh my God, I couldn't stand the first time. So I thought, oh my God. I mean, I literally, almost passed out. So I thought, okay, I can't stand that pain again. I can't, I'm not going to say anything, And my mother was abusing me. So what was I supposed to do, right? My mother was beating on me and hurting me in every way. And so, I didn't say anything for a while, and then finally blew the whistle and told my mother what was going on. And her response was, that was my problem, not hers. I was going to have to deal with it. And for me to wrap myself up like a mummy at night when I went to bed, that was her answer to the thing. So my brother just continued to sexually use me, right? So this is really sad, very true, but many times parents won't get involved, or another person who the child actually discloses the abuse to won't get involved, because they don't want the other person to go to jail, or they don't want to have get involved in some sort of a lawsuit, or somebody going to prison, or they have to go to court or trial. See, my parents were brought up on charges. Both my parents were brought up on abuse charges. So when I told my mother that my brother was doing things to me at night, and it was hurting me, that my parents were already brought up on charges. They would have been busted again, and they would have been really busted this time, because my mother had been abusing me the whole time since the last time that they had been brought up on charges, and the social workers were around. So it was real convenient for my mother to tuck that one away, because she was not going to deal with it, because she's like, no, we're not dealing with this, because the bruises and all of the beatings that I had taken from her would have shown up, and my parents would have been brought up on charges again. And my mother, when I told my mother this, I was 8 years old. She was 38 years older than me. My mom had me when she was 38. So my mom was 46 years old. My mother was my age when she allowed me to be raped and sodomized by my brother. I mean, how horrific can you... I mean, this is the reality that I faced as a child. And the sad thing, and so now I think about it right now, my mother was my age when she was beating on me and hurting me and kicking me around, and she continued to do that until I was 17 years old. You know what I mean? So these were not young, inexperienced parents. My parents were brought up on charges. They had been abusing their children for years and years and years, and that's, pretty well what was wrong with my brother. He was screwed in the head from the abuse that he suffered as a child. Is it an excuse? No, not at all, right? It's not an excuse. It never will be an excuse. You just can't use that for an excuse. My mom and dad tried to use that as an excuse in the courts, saying that, you know, well, they were abused as children. Of course, they were hauled in for psychological evaluation, and they were both found psychologically, mentally ill, with all kinds of problems, right? But we were allowed to stay in the home. Oh yeah, because that was 1968, right? Who cares about the kids? 1968, nothing was being done, and even the system, you know, wasn't even really all that great then. It still has problems today, but I know that today we would have been definitely removed from home, or there would have been a lot more serious repercussions for the abuse that my parents were putting on us. But see, back in 1968, people pretty well thought it was still a family problem. Oh, just a family problem, right? Let's just leave it at that, you know. So it's pretty sad. That's the truth and the reality of it. And you know, this is why we have to work so hard to change these laws and to change the situation for these kids out here. It's just not right. You know what I mean? So they said that child sexual abuse occurs in all social and economic classes of people. So it has the same type of risk factors as physical child abuse, which is, you know, just any kind of issue like alcohol, drug abuse, substance abuse, right? Family troubles, poverty, abuse. People will quite often blame the economy for child abuse, and that's so incredibly stupid. It's the parents' inability to properly cope, right, with whatever's going on in their life. There's a lot of people who live below the poverty line who do not abuse their children. They love their children, and they live below the poverty line too, and they treat their children with respect and dignity, and they bring their children up as best they can under the poverty line. And then you have all these other people who just can't cope for some reason. They're just not mentally equipped or socially equipped or whatever their issues are to have a child, and so they're stressed out. They take it out on the child, and they blame the economy for it. I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. And you know, substance abuse, you know, that's just wrong, and people are just making the wrong choices on behalf of their children when they're using any type of substance abuse around a child. I have to say that I think people should just be responsible, you know what I mean, and stop abusing their children and blaming the drugs, you know what I mean. My parents blamed everything else but their own actions. See, that's why I like to call attention to my case, because my situation, I'm speaking on behalf of my brothers and sisters too, is that, you know, because I'm the youngest of 7, right? There were 7 of us. You know, in my case, like, I mean, it was typical classic abuser stuff, right? My parents were blaming everybody except for themselves for the abuse. My dad blamed the 1960s, and he blamed the devil. My dad was like, well, the devil made me do it. And he blamed the 1960s. He blamed the era. Oh, it was the 1960s, and it was the devil that made me do it. And then my mom was blaming everybody else. My mom was blaming my dad. My mom was blaming my dad for her abusing me. Well, it's all your father's fault that I abused you and that I had to beat you up. It was all your dad's. Everything was always my dad's fault. So, or it was her abusive past. Oh, well, I was abused as a child. You know what I mean? This type of thing. She would never ever take responsibility for what she did to me. Never. And neither would my dad. And so the sad thing is that's the classic abuser. They don't want to ever take responsibility for what they do. My brother that sexually used me actually committed suicide at the age of 33, so there you go. But in a situation where he was sexually asphyxiating himself, and he was getting off, and he killed himself. And whether he did it on purpose, we don't know, but he had tried to kill himself many times. And that's why I kind of thought, it's probably a suicide, but he probably wanted to go out that way, right? So he probably did it on purpose. But the thing is, he was very, very sick. Who knows how many people he sexually used? Who knows? I mean, my parents didn't report it. I went into denial. You know what I mean? I was in a state of denial because of the abuse. Actually, I had split. So it's not that I even wanted to be. It's not that I denied it. It's a form of denial because it's a disassociation. It's a split. So basically, I didn't want to admit it. You know, even to the gynecologist. You know, when I went in there, I was like, what was I supposed to say? They asked if I had ever had sexual intercourse before. So what was I supposed to say? Yes, when I was 8 years old, my brother sodomized me and raped me and, you know, sexually used me for about a period of about 7 months, 8 months. You know, like, how embarrassing is that, right? So I didn't say anything. I thought, they won't know, right? And so I go in there and they do the test. The gynecologist was like, well, honey, you're not a virgin, and, you know, you've been sexually abused, right? I was like, I'm a virgin. She's like, look, you know, you have been sexually abused. Like, we can tell. We know what we're looking at. And so you can stick to your story all you want. You're an adult, so we can't force you to change your dime. But what we are going to do is write down what we find. So we're not going to, you know what I mean? We're going to have to write this on our records, and you deal with whatever you're going to deal with there. But, you know, you stick into your story, that's fine, but we know you've been sexually abused. And I was like, well, I'm a virgin. She's like, well, whatever you want to believe, honey, but you're not a virgin, and you've been, you'll be lucky to have a child. You'll be lucky to conceive, right, because of the damage done. She's like, you probably will not be able to even conceive, let alone have a child, right? So I was like, well, I just didn't want to even admit that even happened to me, even though I had been facing it my whole life, right? Pretty horrific kind of stuff that person has to go through, right? But this is what kids are going through right now out here, and that's why I work so hard to try to stop child abuse of all types, right? They said symptoms. Here's something people need to pay attention to, right? Because these are very much what I had to go through because I was sexually abused as a child. Symptoms of sexual abuse in children are similar to those of depression or severe anxiety and nervousness, and the physical symptoms are what they describe here. So, and these are, of course, graphic, right? So, I'm talking graphic stuff. So if you think it may bother you, please turn the show off at this point. Bowel disorders such as soiling themselves, that happened to me, because I was sodomized and I was being raped on a regular basis there for a while, and I couldn't even keep control of my bowels. Like, I had no control, and so I just had diarrhea and all kinds of problems. Right, it was horrible. Like, and that's just on its own wouldn't necessarily be a sign, but another sign is genital or rectal problems such as pain during a bowel movement or urination, vaginal itching or discharge, and I had all of that. And so that's the issue, had my mom been paying attention, right, she would have. Well, I told her, but she didn't even care about the damage being done. You know what I mean? That I was literally physically damaged because of I was bleeding as an 8-year-old child, bleeding for months because of this rape and sodomy, right? And repeated headaches, sleep problems. I didn't sleep well. I didn't sleep well in my home anyway because my parents were always trying to kill us, right? And they were trying to kill each other all the time. So it was a dangerous place. I didn't really sleep all that well anyway. So, and especially after the child sexual abuse, I really didn't sleep that well. So then I was just not sleeping well, period, right? Stomach aches, these type of things, vague complaints. Children who are abused may display disruptive behaviors, and they might, start using alcohol, street drugs, engaging in high-risk sexual behaviors. I was using alcohol and drugs, but I was totally shut off sexually. Like, I wouldn't even let anybody touch me. I couldn't even have any high school sweethearts, because I would not let a guy even come near me. And, that's just the way it went, right? I had to protect myself, and, I was just, not letting anybody in, so I was very much non-sexual, right? I went the other way. I had friends who were sexually abused as children, and they went the other way. They were promiscuous and out there just, really just in all kinds of high-risk behaviors sexually, and I was just, shut down completely, Yeah, pretty harsh on children, absolutely. They may do poorly in school because they can't concentrate. You think about being raped. I had to go to school. You know what I mean? I had to go to school and finish off that year in school after being raped and sodomized by my brother and suffering from all kinds of vaginal problems and discharges and bleeding and itching and irritation. I had a huge infection, and my mother wasn't helping me. I was sicker than a dog, and not only that, but she was beating on me, so that didn't help. But the thing is, I was used to that treatment. People might say, well, how did you survive that? Well, I was already being abused from the time I was born, 0 to 8 years old. So I was used to sleeping on the floor. I was used to being kicked around. I was used to being beaten on, spit on, burned. My mother was abusing me. She was my main physical abuser, as well as verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, right? And my dad was also verbally abusing me too, and as well as physical abuse, right? And so I was used to being abused. That's all there was to it, right? So it was just part of my life. They may have excessive fears, withdrawal from normal activities. If this is science, parents, you need to learn this stuff, right? If your child was doing great in sports or some after school activity, and all of a sudden they shut down and they really become withdrawn and they don't want to talk to you about it, and they're afraid that they start acting kind of afraid and suspicious. There's something going on, right? Be sure behaviorally, child sexual abuse is not always, you can't always see the physical signs from child sexual abuse, especially molestation or just unwanted sexual touching. You may not even realize that your child is being sexually abused, and they may be shutting down, and you wouldn't even know that if you weren't paying attention to their behaviors. Very important. So they said if you suspect a child has been sexually abused, the child should be examined as soon as possible by a trained healthcare professional. They said most pediatricians, many family medicine doctors, most emergency room ER doctors have been trained to examine cases involving sexual abuse. And they said, do not delay a doctor's exam for any reason. So they said many signs of injury related to sexual abuse are temporary, and the exam should be done within 72 hours of the event or discovery. And they said, for instance, don't don't have a bath, don't bathe, don't do anything. If your child has been sexually abused, or you suspect your child's been sexually abused in any way, you just get your child to the proper doctors that can actually, look into that for child sexual abuse, and have an exam done, and because they know what to look for. And if you have a shower or a bath or whatever like that, you clean your kid up, you're actually washing away evidence that could be used against the perpetrator. So don't do that. It's the same with an adult in a situation of a rape or sexual assault. It's very important for adults to know that too. Don't go home and clean up. You need to go directly to the ER and have somebody who's trained, who can get the information and actually log it as file it as a complaint, file it as a crime. Right. First of all, you have to get a police report made, because child sexual abuse is a crime, and so is obviously rape and adult sexual assault and rape. Right. It's a crime. It's a crime. It doesn't matter that it's happening. It's a crime. Right. People think, oh well, this just happens. This is what people do. No, it's a crime. It's not right. It never will be right. And it's a crime. It needs to be punishable by law. And there's laws that say child sexual abuse is a crime. Sexual assault, rape is a crime, an adult or a child. So you do the right thing and you get your child some help, right? So they said a complete physical exam must always be performed, right? Because you want to make sure, like if you suspect a child's been abused in any way, you get your child some help, man. I'm telling you that, because this is ridiculous. They said like affected areas may include the mouth, throat, penis, anus, vagina, including the hymen. And the hymen is a thin piece of tissue covering the opening of the vagina. It can be affected by abuse. And they said especially if there's sexually transmitted diseases, right? STDs and stuff. No child should have an STD. So if your child does, you need to get something done. You need to get a test. You need to make sure that child's not being sexually abused, right? And it's just really important to make sure that you protect your children. You know what I mean? Oh my God, you just don't want your child to be a victim of a child sexual predator or pedophile, somebody in your home who could be using the child sexually. My God, people like to think this doesn't happen, but it does, this is really, really sad. You have to report it to the police you get a police report made. It's a crime, and many times, like abuse within families, incest and whatnot, half the time they won't even remove the abuser. They just make them go get counseling. They make them leave the home for like a period of time and go get counseling and treatment. Then they send them back, and they're allowed to go back in the home. This is ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like society basically saying, oh, it's okay for mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, brother, sister to rape whoever they want, sexually use whoever they want, molest whoever they want. This is incredibly wrong, and we need to send a message to the lawmakers. This has got to change, and society needs to change the way they feel about it. That's why I'm talking about this on my show, because I was abused as a child in every way. But, I'm not going to shut up, right, just because society doesn't want to hear about it. I'm going to be more vocal and more out there, because we need more done. We need more done to stop this mess. And it's up to you. It's up to me. If you're listening and you're a parent, you make sure your child is not being abused in any way. And you do the right thing by your child. You do the right thing by children, period. A child's being abused, you do the right thing. You make a phone call. You get that child some help. If you suspect abuse, you do the same thing. You make a phone call. You get that child some help. Because so many people won't. And I was abused as a child. Growing up as a child, I knew so many kids who were being abused, and that was our life. None of us thought about making a phone call. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of times people within the family unit aren't going to get that child any help. And even the children won't even reach out to get help. Right? Because if it's their life, if it's what they've known their whole life, 0 to whatever, it's kind of different, a child who may, have treated very lovingly and cared for, and then end up, in a situation where the parents divorce, and then the other parent, remarries, and then the new person in the home abuses them. They might think, wow, I was loved, and now I'm being abused. Now I better, they might think to make a phone call. But somebody who's grown up in that's their life. That's their daily breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Not necessarily going to do the right thing. They're not going to necessarily make the phone call, right? You got to be that person, right? So be that person for these children out here. You see abuse, you make the phone call. You get these children some help. And do the right thing, right? It's so important. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. We've got about not even a minute left. I'll be back on tomorrow morning, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, same time, same place, 6 o'clock a.m. And thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. All my good friends are tuning in, and I just love you all very much. And wish you all a good night. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.